I still remember the sound of the front door slamming behind me. My hands were shaking, my suitcase dragging behind me like a dead weight. I didn't cry. Not then. I was too stunned to feel anything, too numb to understand that I had just been cast out of my own home, not for stealing, not for lying, not for doing anything wrong, but for calling 911 on my brother, Blake Carter, my older brother, the golden boy of our town, the one whose face graced local newspapers and school banners, star quarterback, homecoming king, top of his class, destined for greatness, loved by coaches, teachers, neighbors, and of course our parents who treated his every step like a prophecy. And then there was me, Emily, 22, a recent college graduate still figuring life out, working part-time at a coffee shop while applying for jobs in journalism. Quiet by nature, observant by instinct, I never considered myself brave. Just careful. The type who notices things others ignore. The type who remembers details and asks questions. And that afternoon, all those traits collided into one irreversible choice. I came home early and saw something I wasn't supposed to see. I pulled out my phone and hit record, then I dialed 911. My voice barely steady as I described what Blake was doing to his girlfriend. I thought the worst was over when the police arrived and took him away. I thought my parents would be shocked that they'd thank me for stepping in for protecting someone from harm. Instead, my mother screamed until her voice broke. My father stood silent with his arms crossed, his jaw clenched. They told me I had destroyed Blake's future, that I had ruined the family's name. They gave me an hour to pack and leave, no discussion, no defense, just pure rejection. So, I walked out with one bag, a phone full of evidence, and a heart pounding with disbelief because I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to let it die in silence. My name is Emily Carter, and if you had met me 6 months ago, you probably wouldn't have remembered me. I was the type of girl who blended into the background, polite but distant, responsible but reserved. I grew up in a small town just outside Columbus, Ohio, where everybody knew everybody, and nothing was more sacred than reputation. My family fit perfectly into that mold. We weren't rich, but we were respected. My father worked as a production manager at a local manufacturing plant, a man of few words who believed in hard work and discipline. My mother taught 8th grade English at the same middle school I once attended. She was organized, meticulous, proud of her children, but especially proud of my brother Blake, the star of the family. Blake was 2 years older than me, and from the time he could walk, people said he was meant for more. He excelled at everything he touched: sports, school, social life. He was the kind of guy who could charm his way out of any trouble and always seemed to land on his feet. He got a full ride to play football at Ridgeway University, and with every touchdown he scored. My parents' pride deepened. They called him their legacy, their hope, their dream in motion. I didn't mind living in his shadow. Not at first. I was never as outgoing or gifted. I liked books, long walks, quiet afternoons at the library. I was the thoughtful one, the careful one, the one who helped Mom grade papers and cleaned up after Thanksgiving dinner without being asked. I never resented Blake, even when he teased me, even when he called me boring or too sensitive. I thought that was just how brothers acted. I thought we were a family, and families stuck together, even if some members shined brighter than others. After college, I moved back home to save money while I searched for a job in publishing or journalism, something that would let me write and observe the world around me. I picked up shifts at a small cafe near the town square, helped around the house, tried not to feel like I was falling behind while Blake was being celebrated everywhere he went. My parents never said it out loud, but I knew they didn't see me the same way they saw him. Blake was the future. I was just passing time. I used to think they still loved me, even if it wasn't as loudly or as proudly. I believed that love meant safety, that home meant protection, but the moment I picked up the phone and called 911, all that vanished suddenly. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was the girl who ruined everything: the traitor, the shame, the one who didn't understand how things worked in the real world. My relationship with Blake had always been complicated. He could be charming when he wanted to be generous even, but there was always something just beneath the surface, a sharp edge to his voice when he didn't get his way, a quick temper he never showed in public. He'd lost it a few times when we were kids. Once he broke a chair because I changed the TV channel. Another time he slammed a door so hard it cracked the frame, but my parents brushed it off. Boys will be boys, they said. Blake's under pressure. He didn't mean it. When he started dating Sarah, I hoped things would be different. She was kind, smart, and soft-spoken, the kind of girl who didn't like drama and always smiled even when she was nervous. I wanted to believe he treated her better than he treated me, but deep down, I saw the same warning signs, the same tight grip on her wrist, the same cold stare when she disagreed with him. I noticed, I remembered. I kept quiet until the day I couldn't anymore. It started on a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of slow day when the sky hangs heavy and everything feels off, but you can't quite explain why I was supposed to work the late shift at the cafe. But my manager texted me saying we were overstaffed and asked if I wanted the day off. I said yes without thinking much of it, just grateful for a break. I got home around 2:30. The house was quiet. My mom's car wasn't in the driveway, and Dad never came home until 6. I figured Blake might be out at practice or class, but as I stepped inside, I heard voices upstairs, not casual conversation, but something sharper, tense, the kind of tone that makes your skin tighten even before you understand the words. I froze in the hallway. I could hear Blake's voice, low but forceful. Then Sarah's, higher and shaky. I moved quietly up the stairs, not with the intention of spying, but because something didn't feel right. The door to Blake's room was slightly open, and I paused just outside, trying to make sense of the muffled exchange. Then I heard it, a loud thud, followed by Sarah's voice trembling, pleading, saying, "Please, Blake, stop. You're hurting me." I pushed the door open just enough to see him with his arm pressed against her chest, holding her back against the wall, his face inches from hers. Eyes cold, jaw clenched. She was crying. Her hands pushing against his chest, but he wasn't moving, wasn't letting go. My heart started pounding in my ears. I fumbled for my phone and hit record. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't think. I just moved on instinct. I knew if I shouted or rushed in, he might turn on me too. Or worse, cover it up before I could prove anything, so I captured what I could, then stepped back, hands shaking as I dialed 911. My voice cracked as I told the dispatcher what was happening. I gave our address and said my brother was hurting his girlfriend. The operator asked if there were weapons I didn't know. I just knew she needed help, and I couldn't do nothing. The police arrived fast, faster than I expected. Maybe because I said there was physical harm. Maybe because this town still takes calls from the Carter household seriously. Either way, within 10 minutes, 2 officers were at the door. I met them halfway down the porch, still gripping my phone. They asked if anyone was inside. I said yes. They told me to stay back, then walked in. I don't know exactly what happened after that because I couldn't bring myself to follow them. I stood in the hallway frozen while they went upstairs. I heard Blake shouting. Sarah crying, footsteps moving fast, then the sound of cuffs clicking, the scuffle of someone being escorted out. I couldn't look, not yet. Not until I heard Sarah's voice break through the noise, soft and raw, saying thank you. I turned and saw her wrapped in a blanket. An officer must have given her her face red and tear-streaked, but her eyes met mine and something passed between us. Not quite forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. I had seen her and I had believed her. When my parents came home later that evening, they found me sitting on the couch, still holding my phone, the video file saved and backed up. I told them everything in one breath about what I saw, what I recorded, what I did for a moment. They were silent, my mother's face pale, my father unmoving. Then the storm began. My mother started shouting, her voice rising to a pitch I'd never heard before, demanding to know how I could do this, how I could destroy my brother's life with one phone call. My father didn't shout, but his eyes were colder than I'd ever seen them. He told me I was naive, that I didn't understand what I had done, that Blake had everything lined up, a future, a scholarship, endorsements even, and now it was all jeopardized because of a misunderstanding. I told them it wasn't a misunderstanding. I showed them the video. My mother refused to watch it. My father barely glanced before saying, "Videos can be misleading, taken out of context." I asked them what context could justify what I saw. My mother told me to stop talking. My father told me to pack my things. They gave me an hour to leave, said I could go stay with whoever I wanted, but I was no longer welcome in their home. I asked if they even cared what had happened to Sarah. My mother called her manipulative, said she had always thought Sarah was looking for trouble. My father said none of this would have happened if I had just minded my own business. I didn't argue after that. I went upstairs, packed a small bag, grabbed my laptop and charger, my phone and charger, and left. I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears would come later in waves that left me breathless and curled up in parking lots. But at that moment, I felt something stronger than sadness. I felt rage, cold and heavy and clear, because I realized in that instant that Blake was never the only problem. The real problem was the wall built around him brick by people who should have known better, and I wasn't going to let that wall stand any longer. The first night I spent away from home was in the back booth of a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. I ordered a cup of black coffee I couldn't finish and stared at the window until the sky turned from black to gray. I had nowhere to go and no one I could call who wouldn't report back to my parents or Blake. I wasn't just the girl who called the cops. I was the girl who betrayed the Carter name, and in a town like mine that made you radioactive. Around 7 in the morning, my phone buzzed. I expected another threat or guilt trip from my parents, but it was a message from Sarah. Just a single sentence, "Are you safe?" I stared at it for a long time before replying. "Yes, I'm at Rivers Diner." Her next message came quickly. "Stay there, I'm coming to get you." 20 minutes later, a dusty blue sedan pulled into the lot. Sarah stepped out, still in the oversized hoodie the cops had given her the night before, but her posture was different, stronger. She walked up to the booth and slid in across from me without a word. She looked tired but focused. I opened my mouth to say something, but she shook her head. "Not yet. Let's get somewhere private first." Her apartment was small and cluttered, a 2-bedroom she shared with a friend named Jess, who was out of town visiting family the moment the door closed behind us. Sarah exhaled and dropped onto the couch. She looked at me, eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and something deeper, something like guilt. She whispered, "Thank you." I told her she didn't have to thank me, that I just did what anyone should have done. But she shook her head again. "No, not anyone." Most people would have looked away. Most people did. We sat in silence for a while, then she pulled out her phone and handed it to me. "Look," she said, "Blake's been messaging me even after his arrest, even after the restraining order." I scrolled through the texts, dozens of them, some begging, some threatening, some promising to expose her. One even had an attachment. I tapped it and saw a photo of Sarah asleep in Blake's bed. He had taken it without her knowledge, and now he was threatening to leak it. She was trembling again, trying not to cry. I asked if she had shown this to anyone else. She said no, not yet. I said we needed to get everything backed up, organized, turned over to someone who could actually help. That's when I remembered the video. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording I had taken. We watched it together, Blake's face clear, his hand pressed against her chest, her voice cracking as she begged him to stop. Sarah turned away before it ended. "It's worse when you see it from the outside," she said quietly. I asked if she had ever told anyone before. She nodded once to her roommate freshman year, but the girl had warned her to stay quiet, that Blake had friends, that speaking out would only make things worse. I didn't respond right away. I was thinking about all the other times Blake had snapped all the things I had excused or ignored, and how easily it could have been someone else next, or me, or Jess, or anyone who said no to him at the wrong time. I told Sarah we had to act fast. Blake wouldn't stop, and neither would our parents. They'd spin the story, claim it was a misunderstanding, frame me as unstable, her as dramatic. I could already imagine the Facebook posts, the quiet gossip in grocery store aisles, the small-town whispers that can ruin a person's life without ever saying her name. Sarah agreed. She opened her laptop and started saving the messages. Screenshots, files. We created a folder labeled Evidence inside it. We added subfolders, one for messages, one for photos, one for documents. I added my video. She added a few pictures of bruises she had taken months earlier but never dared to show. We moved methodically, not speaking much, just clicking and copying and organizing, like building a case brick by brick, because that's what it was, a case, and if no one else was going to pursue justice, then we would. I called an old classmate from college, Avery Brown. She had gone to law school and now worked with a nonprofit helping victims of domestic violence. I wasn't sure if she'd answer, but she picked up on the second ring. I explained everything in a rush. She didn't interrupt, just listened, then said, "I'll be there by noon. Don't post anything online. Don't tell anyone else. And whatever you do, don't go back to your parents' house alone." When she arrived, she came with a battered briefcase and a calm intensity that filled the apartment. She reviewed the materials, asked clear, direct questions, made notes, took copies of everything onto a flash drive, then told us she believed we had a strong case for multiple charges, including assault harassment and possibly conspiracy if we could prove Blake's parents had knowingly covered for him. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a personal nightmare and started feeling like a mission, not just for Sarah, not just for me, but for every girl. Blake had hurt. Every silence he had bought every time someone said, "Boys will be boys," and walked away. Avery looked at us and said, "This is just the beginning." That night, after Avery left, Sarah and I sat in her apartment staring at the folders we had just built. It didn't feel like enough, not yet. There was still a missing piece, something bigger we hadn't uncovered. I couldn't stop thinking about all the other times Blake had crossed lines, times that never made it to the police, the times we all ignored the girls who disappeared from parties without explanation, the sudden transfers, the rumors that got buried so fast they almost felt like dreams, and then something clicked. I remembered a night 2 years ago. Blake had come home from a party drunk and angry. I was in the kitchen grabbing water and I heard him yelling on the phone. I didn't catch everything, but one phrase stood out. I told her to shut up and she didn't listen. "I'll handle it." Mom said she'd make the call at the time. I thought it was just drama, just a fight, but now it felt different, heavier. I told Sarah about it and she went silent for a moment, then stood up and walked into her bedroom. She came back with a small box inside, were papers, receipts, screenshots, even a photo of a check made out to a girl named Lindsay Reed. $5,000, memo line blank date. 2 weeks after a football team party, where someone said Lindsay had locked herself in a bathroom crying. Sarah said she didn't know why she kept it, but something had told her it mattered. I stared at the photo and realized I had seen that checkbook before. It was my mother's, the exact same floral-patterned ledger she kept on the desk in the kitchen drawer. Always organized, always balanced. I remembered her writing in it, making entries, whispering on the phone about deposits and adjustments, and asking Dad if the problem had been resolved. I had never questioned it, but now I couldn't stop. If my parents had been paying off girls to protect Blake, then this wasn't just about him anymore. It was a system, a machine built to preserve his image and their reputation at all costs. And I had been living in the heart of it for 22 years. The next morning, I reached out to my younger cousin Julia, who sometimes helped my mom with her bookkeeping for the school fundraiser. I asked her casually if Mom still kept both ledgers. Julia hesitated, but then confirmed it. "Yeah, she has 2. One for the house, and one she keeps locked in her desk drawer." Why? I told her I just needed to check something. Nothing serious. Julia didn't push, just warned me not to get caught snooping. I thanked her and hung up, heart pounding. I looked at Sarah and said, "I think I know where the rest of the story is." Avery told me not to go back to the house alone, but technically I was still a legal resident and my parents weren't expecting me, so I waited until Thursday evening when I knew they'd be at a fundraiser at Dad's work. I used my old key to slip in through the garage. Everything looked the same, but felt different, colder, like the house itself knew I didn't belong anymore. I went straight to the study, opened the bottom drawer, and there it was, a plain black ledger with careful handwriting filling each page. Names, dates, amounts, some labeled tuition assistance, others marked as donations, but the patterns were too clear, too deliberate. Every entry came within weeks of a reported incident, a party gone wrong, a girl leaving school, a rumor that vanished overnight. I took photos of every page, every detail, my hands shaking as I flipped faster and faster until I found one labeled Sarah M. Date, matching the day after Blake and Sarah had their first big fight. $6,000 labeled emergency housing stipend. I almost dropped the book. I heard a car door slam outside and froze. My parents weren't supposed to be back yet. I shoved the ledger back, ran upstairs, ducked into my old room, and waited. Footsteps entered, voices carried up the stairs. It was my mother and Blake. He wasn't supposed to be out, not yet, but of course he was. His voice was angrier than I'd ever heard it. "I told you I could handle her," he snapped. "She had no right. No idea what she started. My mom said nothing for a moment. Then she whispered something I couldn't hear. Blake responded with, "We should have gotten rid of that video. We should have shut her down from the start." I pressed my back to the wall, heart pounding, then heard my mother say, "We have to protect you no matter what." I didn't wait for more. I slipped out through the side window, ran 2 blocks before I stopped to breathe, then called Avery, told her everything. She told me to get back to Sarah's and stay there. I sent her all the photos, all the audio I'd caught accidentally while hiding in the room. The whole time my phone was buzzing with unknown numbers, threats, blocked voicemails. My parents were moving faster than I'd thought, trying to clean up what they could. That night, Avery contacted a detective she trusted, someone who'd handled similar cases. She reviewed our materials and said she'd launch an inquiry into potential witness tampering, hush payments, and obstruction. Sarah and I watched as the wall around Blake started to crack, the Golden Boy armor splitting under the weight of evidence truth, and the voices of the girls he thought would never speak. We weren't done yet, but we had just struck the first real blow. The day Avery filed the first formal motion was the day the story stopped being ours alone. By then, we had compiled over 100 pages of evidence, text messages, financial records, video files, voice recordings, and sworn statements from Sarah and myself, and though it was still quiet in town, like the moment before a storm, we knew what was coming. Avery said the first step was to take back the narrative, because once we spoke, others might find the courage to do the same. So she arranged a small press conference with a local journalist she trusted. Not a big network, just a small digital news outlet that focused on accountability and community safety. We met them in the back office of a bookstore in Columbus, nothing flashy, just a camera, a voice recorder, and 2 folding chairs. I didn't want to speak at first. The thought of putting my face on something so messy made my stomach twist, but Sarah took my hand and said, "We didn't have to be perfect, just honest." She went first. Her voice clear but trembling, she said her name, said Blake's name, and told the truth, every word measured but real. I followed, spoke about what I saw, what I heard, what I did. I didn't cry. Not, then I just told it straight. And when the video went up 2 days later, something shifted, not immediately, but slowly, like the town was exhaling after holding its breath too long. The first message came from a girl named Lindsay, the same name from the check Sarah had found. She said she saw the video, recognized the ledger entry, and remembered the call she got from Blake's parents telling her to forget about it. She said she'd speak to the detective if needed. Then came others, a girl from Blake's high school who said she dropped out her senior year after a misunderstanding with the football team, a former Ridgeway student who said she tried to report Blake her sophomore year, but her complaint mysteriously vanished after a meeting with the dean. Within a week, the local police had reopened Blake's case. The restraining order violations and harassment claims were now part of a broader investigation. Avery worked with the district attorney to present everything we had gathered, and the DA agreed to pursue multiple felony charges, including aggravated assault, coercion, and witness tampering. Meanwhile, the local school board launched a quiet review of the athletic program, and my parents, who once moved through the town like royalty, suddenly found themselves dodging reporters outside the grocery store. The backlash came hard. Anonymous emails, threatening phone calls, whispers about me being unstable, a liar, a jealous sister who wanted to destroy her brother's life. My parents released a statement calling the accusations deeply hurtful and categorically false. They said I had always struggled with emotional regulation and had fabricated events to seek attention. I read the words 3 times, stunned by the cold calculation of it, but Avery just smiled and said, "Good, that's defamation, and it makes our case even stronger." Sarah and I stayed mostly indoors. We worked with Avery on building the timeline, naming each girl we could find, identifying every pattern, every payoff, every quiet cover-up. It was like putting together a puzzle no one wanted to admit existed, but with each new piece the picture got clearer. Blake wasn't just a bad boyfriend, he was a protected predator, a symbol of everything small towns get wrong when they worship talent over truth, and now the curtain was falling. When the police came to arrest Blake again, this time for violating the no-contact order and attempting to intimidate a witness, it was quiet. No sirens, no public scene. Just 2 plainclothes officers walking him out of the house, while my father stood on the porch yelling about false charges and political attacks. The moment was filmed by a neighbor and leaked online. It didn't go viral, but it reached the people who mattered. And by that evening, 3 more messages had come in, all from women who said they had stories too. That night, Sarah and I sat on the floor of her living room surrounded by open files and legal pads, the air thick with exhaustion, but also something else. A sense of control, of momentum. I looked at her and asked if she ever thought this day would come. She shook her head, said she had spent years thinking no one would believe her, that Blake would always get away with it. I told her I used to think the same thing about everything about him, about my parents, about this town. But now I wasn't so sure. Maybe truth didn't always win right away, but it had a way of growing louder piece by piece, until even the people who refused to listen had no choice but to hear. The trial took nearly 5 months to begin, and in that time, everything I thought I knew about family loyalty and truth unraveled and rearranged itself. Blake remained in custody after his second arrest, denied bail due to the weight of evidence and risk of intimidation. My parents hired a high-profile attorney and tried to shift the narrative again, claiming they were victims of a smear campaign. But no matter how many statements they released or interviews, they tried to manipulate the truth, kept pushing back harder. Sarah testified first, her voice steady and her story unwavering. Then came Lindsay, and then another girl named Julia, each one adding layers to the same pattern, the same behavior, the same silence. When I took the stand, I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow, like I had emptied myself out just to make room for the truth. But I told it anyway, every word, every memory, every detail, not for revenge, not even for justice, but because it needed to be said out loud. Blake was convicted on multiple counts, including second-degree assault, coercion, and harassment. The judge sentenced him to 17 years in prison with no parole. For at least 10, my parents were not charged criminally, but the civil case. Avery filed, exposed enough to cost them everything: their jobs, their standing in the community, their reputation. The restaurant they invested in together filed for bankruptcy after local support vanished overnight. They moved to another town a month later, and I haven't heard from them since. Sarah stayed in the apartment she's working with a support organization, now helping other survivors navigate legal systems and rebuild their lives. She says it gives her purpose. And when she smiles now, it reaches her eyes in a way it never did before. Avery went on to publish a report on the case, using it to push for legislative changes in how schools and communities handle reports of abuse tied to powerful families. Her work caught the attention of a national network, and she's since started a nonprofit of her own. As for me, I didn't go back home. I found a job in the city working with a publication that tells stories, like mine. Stories that were once buried under shame, fear, or the weight of someone else's name. I live in a small studio now, nothing fancy, but it's mine. Quiet and safe, and every morning when I wake up, I remind myself that I'm still standing, not because it was easy, but because I chose not to stay silent. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it, if I wish I had just kept my head down, looked the other way, protected the image of the family instead of breaking it, and I won't lie. There are moments when the loneliness creeps in, when I wonder what it would feel like to still have a place to go for Christmas or someone to call when the world feels heavy. But then I remember the look on Sarah's face when she read the verdict, the relief in Julia's voice when she realized someone finally believed her, the way the courtroom fell silent when Blake was led away in cuffs. And I know I made the right choice. The truth is, family is not blood. It's not obligation. It's not a name or a house or a history. You're told never to question. Family is the people who show up when it matters, who believe you, even when it's inconvenient, who don't ask you to be quiet for the sake of appearances. I lost my parents, but I found something better, a new kind of family built not on silence, but on truth. And maybe that's the hardest part of growing up, learning that sometimes the people who raised you are not the people you need to become, who you're meant to be. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes loyalty becomes a cage. But when you finally step outside of it, when you stand up and speak, when you fight for what's right, even when it costs you everything, that's when you're truly free.